The bar was empty, save for one last customer. When he smiled, the fire in his eyes burned too deep, too knowing. Time warped, shadows shifted, and the bartender realized this was no ordinary man. This was the devil himself. The bar was quiet, almost painfully so. Dim lamps hung low, their warm glow reflecting off the polished wood of the counter and the empty glasses lined neatly along the shelves. It was the end of the night, and the bartender, wiping down the bar, thought of how he relished these quiet moments after the chaos of earlier crowds. Only one customer remained. He sat at the far end of the counter, a straight-backed, deliberate posture that demanded attention without trying. His presence was unsettling, though it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was in the precision of his movements, the unnerving calm with which he surveyed the room. His gaze pierced, steady, holding the bartender in a way that made him shiver without cause. "A whiskey. Neat," the man said, voice smooth, carrying an authority that felt almost physical. "Last call," the bartender replied, trying to infuse lightness into his tone, though the words sounded hollow. Minutes passed, the clock ticking normally, but the room began to feel different. Time seemed to stretch, bend, as if the laws that govern the world had loosened their grip. When the bartender slid the glass across the counter, the man's lips curved into a faint, unnerving smile. It was a smile that spoke of knowledge too vast, too ancient, to belong to any human. "You know they're watching you," he said suddenly. The voice was calm, yet it sank into the bartender's chest like a cold blade. He blinked, disoriented, unsure if the thought was his own or whispered into his mind from some impossible source. The room seemed to shrink. The man's movements were precise, deliberate. He didn't fidget or shift unnaturally. Every gesture was exact, controlled. Even the glass of whiskey seemed to respond, trembling slightly as if aware of its owner's power. "You understand what last call truly means," he murmured. "For you, for all of us." The bartender felt the room tighten around him. The lamp's light seemed colder. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls. Each step the man took, each word he spoke, pressed on the bartender's mind like a weight, a subtle but relentless pressure. He tried to keep his composure, telling himself this was a human, just a man playing some strange game. But the knowledge clawed at him. This was something else. And then the smile deepened. In his eyes, flames danced. Not literal fire, but the impossible glow of hellish light, burning deep and knowing. The bartender realized, with a jolt of terror, that this was no human. He was in the presence of the devil himself. "Night ends soon," the man said quietly, yet his words resonated like a decree. "I just wanted to remind you who is really in charge." He rose from the counter, leaving the glass untouched, and in a movement too quick to follow, he vanished. The bartender was left staring at the empty bar, the faint echo of footsteps that had never existed, and the profound silence that suddenly carried wait time felt brittle, fragile, as though it might snap with the next breath. When the bartender finally stepped outside, the night air was unnervingly warm, heavy, carrying an unfamiliar density that pressed down on his shoulders. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, something no one else would believe. The last call was not merely the end of a shift. It had been a confrontation with the eternal, a reminder that forces beyond understanding walk among the living, silent and patient. He returned home that night, unable to sleep. Shadows lingered in corners, ordinary sounds took on sinister inflections, and he found himself checking locks repeatedly, as if the devil might have followed him. The memory of the man's eyes, the impossible calm, and the smoldering knowledge of their significance refused to leave him. Days later, the bar reopened. Customers came, laughter returned, and the world resumed its usual rhythm, or at least what the bartender could perceive as usual. But something had changed. The air behind the bar felt subtly charged. Glasses sometimes rattled without wind, and in quiet moments the bartender could swear he felt a presence, watching, waiting, as though the devil's gaze had not been left behind, but had followed him, invisible yet undeniable. Every last call from that night replayed endlessly in his mind, a looping echo of the inescapable truth. The devil does not need to raise his voice. He does not need to leave footprints. He only needs to be present, patient, and precise. And when he does appear, there is no escape from the awareness of his watchful, eternal gaze. The bartender learned to live with the memory, but some nights, when the lamps burn low and the bar is empty, he feels the weight of those unseen eyes, and he knows without a doubt that one day they will meet again. The sun was bleeding out of the sky when I stepped into the trap. Steel jaws clamped around my leg, and in an instant, everything changed. Darkness crept in, and I realized the forest wasn't just alive, it was hunting me. I'd been walking the forest trail for hours, the smell of pine and damp earth filling my lungs, the soft rustle of leaves, the only sound I loved these solitary hikes, the quiet solitude where my thoughts could roam freely. But that evening, as the sun hung low, painting the treetops gold and crimson, something invisible shifted in the air. I took a step forward and felt a snap of steel bite into my leg. Pain exploded like fire through my body. I screamed, but the forest swallowed the sound. I looked down, a bear trap, sharp, jagged teeth clamped around my lower leg, ripping through flesh and bone. My vision blurred with pain and shock. The trap's jaws didn't just pinch, they severed. I stared in disbelief at the blood-soaked ground, realizing my leg was gone. Panic surged. I tried to pull free, but the trap's grip only tightened on what remained. Darkness was falling fast. Every rustle, every creak of the trees sounded like footsteps, like something stalking me. I crawled toward the nearest tree, every movement sending waves of agony up my spine. My mind screamed, but my body was half gone, half useless. The forest grew darker, the shadows stretching unnaturally. That's when I felt it, an awareness, a presence. Something moved between the trees, not making a sound, but altering the space around me. My heart pounded. I could hear nothing real, only what felt like its thoughts pressing against mine. Killed patient, hungry. A shadow flitted across my vision, not an animal, not human. Something elongated, sleek, moving with precision and intelligence. I couldn't see details, just the impossible way it navigated the darkness, almost as if the trees themselves bent to accommodate its steps. It was studying me, waiting for me to panic further, and I did. I tried to drag myself along the ground toward the trail, the stump of my leg a constant burning reminder of mortality. Every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves made me jerk violently. The shadow danced at the edges of my perception. Then I heard it, a low, gurgling laugh, like a child's, but wrong hollow. Empty. It reverberated through the trunks, echoing in ways that shouldn't be possible. I froze, clutching the stump of my leg, wishing I could disappear, wishing the earth would swallow me. The forest seemed to pulse, alive, aware. Branches brushed against me, not by wind, but by unseen force. Rocks shifted underfoot as though to block me. Roots twisted to trip me. It was guiding me, hurting me into terror. Every attempt to move was agony. Every time I looked toward where I thought the creature might be, it vanished, only for the sounds of movement to creep closer, then recede, teasing me. Hours felt like days. The last traces of sunlight disappeared, leaving a black void that wasn't simply the night. It was watching, breathing. I remember crawling, half blind from blood loss, hearing my own ragged breathing competing with the forest's unnatural rhythm. The shadow was everywhere and nowhere I could feel it when I shifted my gaze. When I blinked, it wasn't hunting for food. It was hunting for fear, for surrender, for something I couldn't name. Finally, I stumbled onto a faint trail leading out, the first signs of civilization dim and distant. Each step was agony, every heartbeat a drum of warning. When I emerged onto the clearing, lights of the distant road glimmered like salvation. The shadow receded with the trees, but its presence lingered. A memory burned into my nerves. I survived. I crawled into an ambulance later, bloodied, broken, one leg gone. But the forest did not release me. I carry its weight in every sound I hear at night, every flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. I know what I saw, or rather felt, was not of this world. Something intelligent, patient, and merciless dwells in that forest, and it remembers me. Even now, I wake in the dark, expecting the shadows to shift, expecting that low, hollow laugh. And I know, without question, that the forest is still there, and it is still waiting. We bought the house for next to nothing, a bargain that seemed too good to be true. On our first evening, the backyard revealed the reason. The grass was uneven, and stones poked through the soil, old, worn, forgotten gravestones. At first, I thought it was just an abandoned garden, the kind where the ground sinks unevenly over time. But then I noticed the names, barely legible, etched into cracked marble. The letters weathered almost beyond recognition. Some of the stones were so old, they looked like they'd been pushed up by something beneath the earth, something that didn't belong to the past. The first night was quiet in the house, except for the occasional creak of floorboards, the usual settling sounds. But then I heard the whispering, not the wind, not the pipes, something else. It was soft, deliberate, carrying syllables that sounded like our names. At first I told myself it was my imagination, the stress of moving, but when my wife whispered my daughter's name and we both froze, we realized it wasn't imagination. Someone or something was there, moving through the yard, through the gravestones, unseen yet present. The following days revealed more. Toys in the yard, left in the morning, were moved by evening, sometimes scattered, sometimes stacked in impossible formations. Doors we knew we'd locked would stand ajar. Shadows shifted in ways that made no sense. At night, the air grew heavier. My skin prickled as if the house itself were breathing, watching, aware. And the whispers never ceased. One evening, I stepped outside to investigate and felt the ground beneath me shift subtly, almost like it was alive. The gravestones seemed to lean toward me, roots and soil twisting unnaturally. I backed away, heart hammering, realizing I could not trust even the earth I walked on. Then came the night of the voices. A chorus of whispers rose from the backyard, indistinct yet hauntingly precise. They called my family by name, taunting, teasing, drawing us toward the gravestones. My daughter clung to me, wide-eyed, and my wife's hand trembled in mine. We huddled together, but there was no comfort, only the oppressive awareness that whatever was there knew us intimately, knew our fears, and fed on them. The house grew colder, the shadows longer, stretching into angles that defied geometry. I saw glimpses of movement, figures slipping between trees, hovering near the stones, watching from behind walls. They were not human, yet they mimicked human curiosity. The gravestones themselves seemed to pulse, subtly as if the ground beneath them remembered something that had never truly died. We tried to leave once, thinking a simple relocation would rid us of the sensation. But the house had its grip. Every door we opened felt heavier, every step toward the car resisted by invisible pressure. It was as if the land itself conspired to keep us in place, a slow, insidious force, reminding us that bargains this cheap come with a price. We remain in the house, but nothing is the same. The backyard is alive, a maze of shadow and whispering stone. Sometimes at night, I see figures standing just beyond the edge of the lawn, motionless, silent, waiting. The whispers return, calling names, recounting memories, as though the gravestones themselves speak through the wind. I have learned a simple truth. We did not buy a house. We bought a witness, a listener, a keeper of the dead. And the dead remember, and they watch. Even now, I hesitate before stepping into the backyard, heart pounding, fearing that with each breath, each step, I will see those eyes, those hollow, patient, unblinking eyes, watching me from beyond the stones, judging, waiting, never letting us go. I thought the fields were empty. We had tended them for years, my sons and I, planting, harvesting, living off the land. But that summer, something changed. It started with whispers, the kind that vanish the moment you try to trace them, carried by the wind. Then came the laughter, soft, distant at first, like children playing behind a hill. I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the night. "Tom, Sam," I shouted, but the echoes returned, twisted, almost teasing. My sons woke, rubbing sleep from their eyes, thinking I was joking, but I wasn't. There were no children on these fields, not for decades. The next night, the laughter grew louder, closer, weaving around the stalks of corn and wheat. Footsteps, tiny but too deliberate to belong to animals, followed us wherever we walked. Every rustle, every snapping twig sounded like a child stepping lightly behind us, just out of sight. We searched, lanterns swinging, but found nothing. Just the silence that followed, dense and heavy, as if the night itself had swallowed whatever it was. I began leaving offerings, toys, scraps of food, hoping to appease whatever haunted us. But the next morning, the items were gone, scattered across the field in ways that made no sense, as if arranged intentionally, a message we couldn't read. Sometimes I found tiny handprints pressed into the soil, not ours, not adult-sized, leading deeper into the darkened rows of crops fear settled in like frost. My sons refused to go into the fields alone. I tried to convince myself it was pranksters, teenagers from the village, but the presence didn't match human timing. It moved, vanished, appeared at impossible distances in the same instant. It was patient, observing, learning. One night, I followed the sounds to the edge of the woods behind the fields. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy silence that pressed against my chest. Then I saw them, shadows thin and flickering, darting between trees and stubble, moving against the wind, laughing without sound. I froze, heart hammering. My sons were behind me, eyes wide, clutching each other. One shadow stepped forward, or at least I thought it did. Its face was blurred, impossible to focus on, but the feeling it radiated was clear. Malice, curiosity, hunger. The laughter rose again, echoing in my skull, twisting my thoughts, making it impossible to think straight. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the tangled undergrowth. From that night on, the fields were never empty. The laughter followed us, a constant, unseen presence. Harvest became dangerous. Tools would disappear, fences torn down, crops trampled in patterns that seemed deliberate. My sons whispered about seeing figures in the rows, watching, crouching low, waiting for us to leave. I tried leaving the farm once, thinking we could escape, but the presence was in the car, in the rear view, in the shadows of the road. The laughter echoed behind us, a warning, a claim. We returned, trembling, to the only home we knew, trapped in the fields by something that didn't exist, or perhaps shouldn't. Now, even during the day, the wind carries it. Soft giggles, tiny footsteps that vanish when you look directly. And at night, when the moon is low, I swear I see shapes among the crops, crouching, shifting, always observing. We live among the unseen, surrounded by laughter that isn't joyful but mocking, patient, eternal. I know the fields are alive, that they remember every step we've taken, and I know that one day the laughter will not vanish. One day it will come for us directly. We thought the old house would be quiet. Its peeling paint and creaking floors had character, the kind that makes a home feel lived in, cozy even. The attic was large, empty, spotless, and inviting. But the first night revealed that something unseen lived there, watching, listening, and never resting. It started with small noises, a soft creak above our heads, the faintest shift of a floorboard. I grabbed a flashlight, climbed the stairs, and found nothing dust-covered boxes, neatly stacked furniture, and the thick scent of old wood. That was all. But the feeling remained, prickling the back of my neck. We were not alone. The next night, the noises returned, louder this time. Footsteps, deliberate and measured, echoing in the empty space of the attic. A scraping sound along the wooden beams, like claws tracing slow, careful lines. I checked every corner, every old trunk, the roof beams, but the attic was untouched, pristine. We tried to rationalize, perhaps old boards settling, maybe rats, the wind sneaking through cracks. But none of it explained the deliberate pattern, the way the sounds seemed to anticipate our movements. Every night I woke to them, footsteps pacing overhead, soft shuffling across the floorboards, the faint scratching of something brushing along the walls. My wife began hearing it too. She would whisper to me in the dark, describing the light tapping, the dragging, the subtle thumps that seemed to track her as she moved. Shadows flickered at the edge of our vision, vanishing the moment we turned to look. Even the air felt different, heavier, dense, almost conscious, pressing down on us as though the house itself breathed. Objects in our rooms sometimes shifted subtly, as if nudged by invisible fingers. Doors that we had firmly closed were found slightly ajar. Windows locked tight, sometimes swung open in the morning. There was no wind, no intruder, no explanation. Only the ever-present sense that something intelligent was observing, studying, waiting. I started leaving the attic completely alone, letting it exist in silence above us. But the nights grew longer, the sounds bolder. A rhythmic tapping along the floorboards, sometimes soft and distant, sometimes close enough that I could swear I heard the faintest scrape of nails or claws. I would lie awake, listening, imagining the figure that never appeared, always just beyond the edge of perception. The tension became unbearable. Sleep was impossible. The house was no longer a refuge, but a trap. the unseen presence shaping our lives from above. Every creak, every whisper of wood, every subtle vibration through the floor sent shivers down my spine. The attic remained empty, yet full. A paradox, something alive, intelligent, unrelenting, without form or substance, that we could not confront or escape. Finally, we realized we could not endure it. The fear had become part of us, threading through every thought, poisoning every moment of peace. We began preparing the house for sale, lowering the price slightly just to escape faster. On the last night, the attic was silent, but the memory of those steps, that subtle, unceasing observation, weighed heavier than ever. We moved to a new home, far from the old one, far from the silent watcher above the clean, empty attic. And yet, in quiet moments, when I close my eyes, I can still hear it. The soft, deliberate steps pacing overhead, the faint scrape of claws against wood, the ghostly presence that doesn't rest, that studies, that waits. We left the house, but the feeling, the awareness that we were never truly alone there, lingers. We will never live in that house again. But some nights, when the wind shifts just right, when the old boards creak, I swear I can hear it still, patient, silent, watching just beyond the threshold of what can be seen. The forest around my cabin was never quiet. It crackled, breathed, snapped, groaned. Every branch had something to say. That evening, though, the silence felt padded, too soft, like it was hiding something. I had just finished chopping wood when I heard someone call out to me from deeper between the pines. The voice was mine. Same tone. Same gravel. Same irritated sigh before speaking. I froze with an armful of logs against my chest. The sky was dimming into that bruised blue that always comes before real darkness, and something in the trees was watching me. I felt it. And then the voice called again. "Hey, come here." I dropped the wood. I didn't even feel it leave my hands. At first, I tried to pass it off as an echo bouncing off the hills, but echoes don't cough the way I cough. They don't rap my exact muttered curse at the end. Whoever or whatever was calling me wasn't repeating a sound. It was imitating me. I backed toward the cabin and kept my eyes on the tree line. The voice called 3 more times. Each time, it pulled farther away, like it wanted me to follow it into the dark, step by step, until I wandered off the path completely. By midnight, I was sitting inside with my rifle across my knees. The fire popped in the stove. Shadows crawled along the walls, and I told myself that if I could just make it until morning, everything would make sense. The forest does strange things. That's what I kept repeating. Then something whispered right behind my ear. "Hey, wake up." I jerked so hard I knocked over a chair. But there was no one in the cabin, no footprints, no drafts, nothing. The whisper had come from a place so close, it felt like someone's lips were almost touching my skin. I lit another candle, then another, but the whispers kept coming, not calling this time, repeating. I heard fragments of things I'd said years ago, curses, half-formed jokes, the stupid little hum I make when I cook, a lullaby my mother used to sing that I accidentally picked up. The voice threw it all back at me with a strange, wooden rhythm, as if someone had memorized my speech patterns but didn't understand them. By morning, I knew it wasn't a person. Too much precision, too much access, too much intimacy. It was learning me, studying me, trying to perfect the imitation. When I opened my door to fetch water, I heard myself greet me from the porch. "Morning, lazy bastard." I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. I shut the door so hard the latch cracked I didn't leave the cabin again that whole day. But the voice didn't need me outside anymore. It circled the walls, pacing with my footsteps, clearing its throat the way I do, even snorting the same annoyed exhale I make when I can't think straight. Every few hours it tried a new sentence. "You hungry? Come on, don't be scared. We need to talk. Follow me." The worst part was the timing. It always spoke at exactly the moment I thought something, like it was inside the idea before I formed the words. It didn't know language, it knew me. On the third night, I tried to run. I grabbed what I could and stepped onto the path before sunrise. The air felt dense, like walking through warm breath. Every tree I passed exhaled my voice. Every branch, every trunk, every snapped twig under my boots. They all repeated my inhaling, my grunting, my pacing. The deeper I went, the louder my voice came from everywhere at once. Not demanding, expectant. "Come back. Come back. You belong here." The forest wasn't calling, it was claiming. I don't know how long I walked, but eventually, the imitation shifted. It stopped repeating and started anticipating. It whispered sentences I hadn't yet thought. It muttered fears I tried to bury. It spoke memories I hadn't told anyone in decades. Then it changed my voice, just slightly, smoothed it, strengthened it, improved it. My imitation had become better than me. I ran. At some point, I made it to the road. Stumbling like a drunk, I slept in a shed behind a farming village. I didn't go back for a week. When I finally did, it was only to grab the last of my things and put the cabin up for sale. Cheap. Very cheap. I didn't explain why. No one would have believed me anyway. But the last night before I left for good, as I tried to sleep on the floor of a stranger's barn, I heard it again. Not outside, not in the walls, in my dream. A whisper in my perfect, improved voice, breathing against the back of my neck. "I'm not done with you." I woke up choking on air, and even though the barn was silent, the tree line at the far end of the village swayed without wind, and from between the trunks, soft and patient, my voice drifted out. "Come here. I'm ready now."